Ladles and jelly spoons, welcome back to Badgerworks. Today, this is the Fokker Eindecker E.II from Eduard in 1/48 scale that I completed recently. And I mentioned in that video that I was going to do a separate video on how I did the rigging, because I didn't want to spend too much time in the other video on it. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's get on with it. Right, so let's talk about some of the tools that we're going to use to do this. I think to start with, we're going to need some tweezers. I've got various different pairs of tweezers. We'll need a knife. We'll need some pliers. We'll need a pin vise, in this case an Archimedes drill. And we'll need some scissors, including these ones. These are my good scissors, my expensive ones. They're Calmore, and they're made for tying fishing flies. And they actually have, you can't see them, but there are micro serrations on the blades, so that when you cut things, they actually grip as they cut, so stuff doesn't come pinging out the blade, which is nice. So I have those as well. And we will need some cutters. And we'll need a couple of other little bits, but I'll talk about those separately. But let's look at what we're actually going to use for our rigging material. So this is one type of material you can use. This is from MIG. This is their rigging superfine 0.01 millimeter. And if you, let me take it out so you can see it a little bit better. It's very, very fine elastic thread. Let me get, if I can get hold of it. Now obviously this is black, but there's you can get it in different colors as well. But it's very, very fine. So this is great for smaller projects. But the trouble is with this stuff is it can be quite expensive. There's, I think one of the most popular ones is called Easy Line, and it's great stuff, don't get me wrong, it's really good stuff, but it is quite expensive to buy. So there are alternatives. Let me show you. Let's put this away because I don't want to lose it. What I'm going to be using is this. This is Prim knitting in elastic. And it's, as the name suggests, it's an elastic thread, and it's very stretchy, and it's used for knitting. So when you're knitting socks, for example, and you want an elasticated top on your socks, you knit this into the design and it gives you an elastic bit. But it's also very good for rigging. It's also much, much cheaper. Most of these professional products, well, I say professional, modelers products, should we say, tend to come in fairly small lengths of maybe 5 meters. This is a 200 meter roll, and you can buy them in packs of 2 from Amazon. I've got a link below, or you can look elsewhere and find. I've not really found it anywhere cheaper, but you're more than welcome to look, obviously. Now, I've had these 2 rolls of this for quite some time now, several years, I would say, at least 2 or 3 years, and this is the first roll and I've barely made a dent in it. So yeah, it's clear. It's a bit difficult to tell, but it's actually clear, and you can paint it any color you want using, you know, acrylic paints or whatever you want, and it will just save you a lot of money. The only downside I would say to it is because of the size of it, it is quite small, but the thing is with it is it's flat. It's actually a flat material, so it looks wider than it is. So you might find, I mean, I've used this on 1/72 scale models and it looks fine, but if you wanted to go, like if you were doing, you know, boats or something, you might want something a bit thinner, I don't know. But certainly for 99% of what I do, this is absolutely fine. So this is what we're going to use. Now, how do we attach our rigging to our model? Well, there's a number of ways of doing it. The simplest way is with super glue. This is really cheap super glue from the pound shop. You can go out and buy more expensive ones if you want. It's entirely up to you. I find this works just as well. So we're going to use this to actually stick it down. But what are we going to stick it to? That's the question. On a 1/72nd scale model or smaller, I tend to stick the rigging material directly to the plastic. But for anything bigger than that, this is when you start getting into the more interesting side with turnbuckles. Now, what is a turnbuckle? Well, a turnbuckle is it's basically two loops joined by a counter-rotating thread, and it's used to tighten metal cables. You'll see them all over the place. If you see anything with steel cables holding it up or holding it together, you'll probably find a turnbuckle in there somewhere. I'll show you a picture of one, and if you want to know more about them, you can go away and Google them, because quite frankly, that's not what we're talking about. But on especially vintage aircraft, nearly all the control cables will have turnbuckles in them to tighten them, to tension them. So it's nice, it's not essential, but it's a nice touch on larger scale aircraft to make the turnbuckles. Now, you can buy turnbuckles, you can buy, there are various companies that make, I've never bought any myself, but I know people who do, and they, you know, it's one of those things, if you want to save yourself some time and you don't mind spending the money, it's a great way to go. But you can make your own, and I'll show you one. Here's one I made earlier. So, I don't know whether you can see that, but that is what I'm going to use as my turnbuckle. So it might be on the white background, actually. There you go. So basically, you can see we've got a little stick of copper with a loop on the end. And I'll show you in a minute how to make them. But you might be saying, well, where do I get the copper from? I'll show you that as well. This is where you get your copper from. This is just a piece of ordinary household wire. This actually came from a roll of wire I bought when I was putting some lights in my daughter's room. But I've also got tons of cable. It's like if you get anything electrical that you're going to recycle, I tend to cut the cable off, the power lead off, and keep it. And you can see here that within each actual wire itself, it's made up of these copper strands. And these copper strands are fantastic for salvaging for all kinds of different things. Not only for making what we're going to do, but you can also use them to make wiring, piping, hoses, and things like that on your models. Because you can bend them into the shape you want, and then they'll hold that shape, and then you can just glue them on and then paint them. So yeah, this kind of wire is always very useful. So it's a case of getting an old piece of wire like this, stripping off the insulation, make sure you don't cut your fingers, and you'll end up with something like this. And then you can cut that into whatever lengths you want and make your turnbuckles. So let's have a look at how we do that. So in order to make the turnbuckles, I'm going to use this. It's a bit difficult to see. Basically, this is a piece of sprung steel wire that I have bent into an appropriate hook and placed in my pin vise. And this is quite small. I'll just measure it. So that is, you can see that there, that is, well, normally about 0.4 millimeters. So that's fine for the tiny ones, but I've also got some other ones here that I made out of different pieces of wire, and that's all they are, they're just bent pieces of wire. So this one is baling wire. Let's measure this one. And that is 1.25 millimeters. And this is a piece of copper wire. And that's 1 millimeter. So depending on what size of eyelet you want in your turnbuckle, you can use different sizes to get different eyelets. So what we're going to do to start with is we're going to make some little tiny ones, because I want them to go on the wings and I don't want them to be too obtrusive. So I've got a little pot here, and this is what I keep my little bits of wire in. And this is just household wire, as I said. It's nothing special. It's just strands of wire taken from household electrical cables. Now what you do is you take your piece of wire and you bend it like that, and we take a pair of pliers or some suitable, I mean you could use tweezers, I just find it's easier with the pliers. Grip it like that, take your hook it through and twist. And just keep twisting and twisting and twisting until you've got the size eyelet that you want. And there you go. I don't know whether you can see that. But now, if I take our knitting elastic and, oh, this is quite tricky. But there you go, you see, that will thread through there. So what we can do now is cut this to length, glue it into position, and it gives us an eyelet and a little turnbuckle to attach our rigging to. Now I'm going to make some more of these small ones, and then I'm going to make some slightly bigger ones, and I'll show you how we're going to use them. Right, so I'm going to take this out of here now and swap it over. Oh, if I can get it undone. So you can see there, it's just a piece of bent wire. And I'm going to put this one in instead, because I want to make some turnbuckles that can take 2 wires at once. So we'll just pop this in here, like that, you see. And now we do the same thing again. Take our piece of wire, bend the end over, and twist. And there you go, you see. So that's about 4 times the size of the other ones. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to try a little experiment here. Right. Because I want to make a double-ended turnbuckle. And I'm hoping this is going to work. Alright, let's just snip that off of there. And there we go. The reason I want that is because where the rigging attaches, there are basically eyelets on both sides of the attachment points. So I'm going to use this, glue it in the middle, and then it gives me an eyelet on each side to put the rigging through. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glue 2 of these to the top of the strut for the top wing, or for the top side of the wing. I'm just going to use a little bit of this super glue gel. This is Loctite. One. 2. Once this dries, we can put some paint on it, and I'm going to put a couple on the undercarriage as well. So here's the undercarriage, and I'm going to put a bit of glue on each end. Like that. And I'm going to put one of these at the back. Like that. And one at the front. Like that. Get rid of that, whatever it is. And the same thing, when that dries, it gives us some nice eyelets to attach our rigging to. Now, you may remember from the previous video, if you watched it, I actually drilled holes in the wings at each of the rigging mounting points. These are 0.5mm holes, and the reason I'm putting these in is to give us somewhere to attach the turnbuckles when it comes to putting the rig in. So I'll paint the wings first, and then once they're painted, I'll put the eyelets on. So to attach them to the wings, I need to snip these down a bit. Like that. And then we're going to put a little dab of super glue on. And we're going to pop that in the hole. Like that. I'm just putting a little bend in it so it's bending slightly towards the inboard side of the wing. And now we just do the same with all the rest. Right, so the first step is to take a piece of your elastic as long as you need, preferably a bit longer than what you need, because the last thing you want is to end up with a bit too short. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to go from here to here to here and back to here, and that gives us, that basically kills about 3 birds with 1 stone. So let's cut a bit off and try and glue it in place. Now there's a bit of a tricky bit here, and it's something I've seen other people do, but I've never done it myself. But basically I want to stick a piece into that hole there, but so that it's coming out both sides. So we just take our cocktail stick and apply a little bit of glue to the hole. And now I'm going to try and push that into the hole. Like that. And the next trick is to put this end through the loop. And the biggest trick with this, the biggest thing with this is don't over tighten it. It doesn't need to be like a bowstring. All you've got to do is just take the tension out of it. Just make it taut. And then we can snip the excess off, like that. Now we want to take this end and thread it through this hole. Oh, as you can see, this does require quite a lot of patience. Thread that through there, like that, and then through that hole there. Like that. And then little dab of super glue, and again cut the excess off. There we go. Now, if you want to, obviously you can paint these this elastic. You could just use normal acrylics or whatever paint you use. You can paint it black or silver or whatever colour you want. I just leave it like this because I like the way it catches the light. So yeah, I'll get on and do the rest of it, and then we'll come back and look at what it looks like when it's all finished. Right, so that's the top side done. Now we can flip it over and do the underside. Now for the underside, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from one eyelet, go up to the middle, loop through, and then back to the outer wing, and that saves us a couple of joints. So we'll start off with the inner eyelet here. Just trying to get my fingers out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Now we'll take the other end, go through the middle, and then back out to the outer wing eyelet. Like that, and then pull it tight, glue it up, job's a good one. And here is the finished article. Now, I know you've already seen this before if you've watched the other video, but hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into the very, very basics of rigging. You can go all out with rigging. I mean, you see the things some people do with rigging is absolutely amazing. The turnbuckles that we made were very, very simple, but they get the job done. And you can take it as far as you want. If you want to make it much more complicated, make your turnbuckles look more realistic, there are ways you can do that, and we can certainly look at those kind of techniques in the future if people are interested. But for now, I just wanted to give you a kind of quick and dirty introduction to rigging. So hopefully this was of interest to some of you. If you have enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you would like and perhaps even subscribe. And should you feel so inclined, I would greatly appreciate it if you consider supporting me on Patreon. Anyway, that will do us for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers. Bye.